My boyfriend is amazing when he's awake, but when he's asleep, he says awful things to me that make me wonder if he secretly feels that way. I, 25F, need to preface this by saying that when my boyfriend, 25M, is awake, he is wonderful and I couldn't be happier. We laugh and joke all day and spending time with him in general is truly a joy. Yes, I mean this. No, he doesn't upset me at all when he's awake. Also, for some background, he works night shifts at a job he really hates, so when he comes home, he likes to just relax and unwind, usually with whiskey or beer. Typically we cuddle or I massage his back and legs until he's drunk enough to fall asleep. He doesn't need alcohol to fall asleep. He can fall asleep fine without it. I just meant that the alcohol makes him fall asleep quicker than usual. I have insomnia, so I usually end up staying awake for a while after he falls asleep. I'm also really sensitive to aggressive tone of voice due to some past trauma. He only really talks in his sleep if I shift too quickly or try to move him over a little bit if I have no room on the bed or if I move the blanket too much and it disturbs him. He usually snaps at me saying quit effing moving. Or can you please effing stop, or oh my effing god, just things in general that give off an indication that he's really annoyed with me. There's also been a couple unprompted times where he's stirred or rolled over, I guess disturbing his own sleep, and said things like I can do better than this, etc. Because of my sensitivity, I usually end up crying over these things. I try to make it a point not to bring up the things he says or does in his sleep, unless they're funny, which sometimes happens, because, for one, I really don't think he can control it, and two, when I have brought up things he said, he always ends up feeling horribly guilty for the things he says, and that makes me feel guilty for saying anything. Last night, in his sleep, he ripped my blanket away from me. We sleep with separate blankets because this has been an issue in the past, and tucked it under himself and his own blanket. It was really cold in the room, so I tried to take it back, but he grabbed my hand and shoved it away. I didn't want to have to wake him up, but he's a lot stronger than me, and no matter what I tried to do, I just couldn't get the blanket back. I shook him gently and kept saying, "Baby, can you please give me back my blanket?" I was met with sleepy grunts, but he still wouldn't give it back. Finally, after a little persistence, he sat up really quickly and yelled, "What do you want?" "Jesus, you're annoying." I said, "I just want my blanket back, please." He shoved it towards me and nearly knocked me off the bed, and then instantly laid back down and started snoring. I didn't sleep at all last night because of this. It's really eating at me. I really don't want to be annoying to him, especially when he's trying to rest after work. But I also don't know how I can keep putting up with this. Part of me wonders if he actually means any of the things he says. When he woke up this morning, I couldn't bring myself to say anything about it, but I also couldn't look him in the eye. I guess my question in this is, am I being too sensitive? Should I bring this up to him? I don't know how much that would accomplish because he usually has no recollection of it and doesn't know how to control it. What can I do to keep my sensitivity from affecting our relationship and the way I see him and myself? First update, 5 days later. First, I'd like to address the comments accusing my boyfriend of being an alcoholic, being abusive, accusing me of lying about how happy I am in the relationship, or claiming he wasn't actually asleep during this and wanted an excuse to abuse me. Y'all are, and really I cannot stress this enough, effing crazy. What a leap. He functions just fine without alcohol, and I've seen him go weeks without it. He doesn't need alcohol to fall asleep. He drinks after work because that's how he likes to unwind. The same as one might go to a bar on the weekend. And for those of you with anecdotes about how your partners started off like this before leading into full-on abuse, I'm deeply sorry that you endured that, and I wish healing on all of you. But that's not what this is. I've known my boyfriend for 10 years. He doesn't have an abusive bone in his body. Now on to the update. Shortly after I made this post, I asked him if he thought I was annoying. He said of course not, and asked me what prompted the question. When I brought up what he did in his sleep, he got very quiet for a short while and then asked, "Why didn't you slap the SHT out of me?" Which made me chuckle quite a bit. He then went on to say that he would prefer I tell him about the things he says in his sleep, stressing that if he crosses a line like that ever again, I have full permission to smack the life out of him. I never would. I asked him if it was a possibility that the alcohol was making his sleep more restless, and he said maybe, I don't know. I then asked him if it would be a possibility to try going a couple nights without alcohol, and he agreed. Since then, our co-sleeping has been wonderful, restful, and peaceful, except for the night before last. He shook me awake while I was sleeping, and I asked him what was up. Baby, I'll show you. I had no idea what he was talking about, so I asked him. He said, "I'll show you." I said, "Baby, are you still asleep?" "Yeah. I'll show you." He instantly started snoring again. I must have giggled myself back to sleep. Anyways, I wanted to thank everyone for the kind advice, and we've decided to cut alcohol out before bed as it seemed to help immensely. Bless. Final update, 2 years and 4 months later. Hi. It's me again. Going back and reading these posts was insanely difficult. I want to kick myself for how deep in denial I was. Everyone in the comments was telling me that my boyfriend is an alcoholic, and I fought so hard against that. But it was true. A few months after my last post, I had an epiphany moment. It was 3 a.m., and he was drunk. He begged me to make him a pot of spaghetti because he liked the way I cooked it. I asked him if he would strain the pot for me, because the pot we had didn't have thermal safe handles, or whatever they're called, and I often would burn myself trying to do it on my own. He grumbled for a bit and said fine. But after less than 5 minutes he said he was going to hang out in our bedroom. I begged him not to, because he would fall asleep, and trying to wake him when he falls asleep drunk often became a nightmare of verbal abuse. He insisted he wouldn't fall asleep, but lo and behold, he did. I thought to myself, great. Now I get to choose between burning my hands, or being berated until I cry, all over a pot of freaking spaghetti. I chose to burn my hands. I angrily made myself a plate and put the rest in a Tupperware, and reality hit. I'm just like my mom. My mom has been with an alcoholic for 13 years. He is awful to her in so many ways, but she puts up with it because A, she feels like she can't do any better, and B, she believes it's her duty as a wife to just deal with it quietly. And I was falling down the same path. I thought that if I could just grin and bear it, he'd see how much I love him and how much I do for him and realize that he needs to put in the same effort. Boy howdy was I f***ing wrong. I took off to a friend's house for the night and he panicked when he woke up in the morning and I wasn't there. He called me, crying, begging me to return. I unleashed all my feelings in return, and in more words told him that I didn't have much of an incentive to return, and how could I know that he'd do better. His tears turned to anger, and he screamed down the phone. It was terrifying. I ended up going back home to collect some things, and told him that I needed to separate from him because I didn't know how to help him anymore, and as deeply as I loved him, I couldn't stay and watch him kill himself any longer. I'll never forget the look he gave me. It was like I had kicked him in the stomach. I stayed with my friend for a month or so, with little to no contact with him. I ended up having to return to collect the rest of my stuff, and I noticed something strange. He had always been kind of a slob, leaving empty beer and liquor bottles on the floor beside his bed, but when I returned, by the side of his bed were only tea, soda, and water bottles. His face was less sunken, and he didn't smell like beer at all. When he went to the bathroom, I took a sneak peek in his garbage can just to be sure. It was full, but there were no signs of anything alcoholic. He caught me peeking, and asked what I was doing. He then told me that he hadn't touched alcohol since the day I left. I was shocked. We ended up sitting and talking for a while. He said being sober was hard and he had the shakes all the time, and he missed me. I missed him too. I've been infatuated with him since I was 13, those feelings weren't going away anytime soon. To wrap things up for the sake of character count, we ended up getting back together. He celebrates 2 years of sobriety this week. I'm so proud of him. He sleeps restfully now, with the exception of a mumble here or there in his sleep, and is no longer mean to me in any facet. Also, we're engaged now. Thanks for reading. I'm sorry I fought you guys so hard, and thank you for telling me the truth even though I wasn't ready to hear it.